I think it's important to understand how things work and use it for simple things, use it for things that actually are going to help in a way that's not actually damaging or taking away from the purpose of humanity. I can see where it's going. Without the guardrails on, it's pretty scary what can happen. It will become even more and more necessary for people to touch, to connect to each other and to nature. It's the calling to come home to ourselves. You can't figure out who you are without the education. The podcast is about this. It's about people who are living on purpose, on mission. They're on their mission in this world, and here's how they're doing it. Welcome to Mission Activated, where we bring you the stories of individuals who've awakened to their true purpose and are living a life of passion, impact, and alignment. I'm Aveline Clarke, your host, and I believe that when you're on mission, everything falls into place. Here, we share the journeys of those who've discovered their unique path and embraced their soul's calling. It's not just about making money in life and in business, it's about making a difference, living on purpose, and inspiring yourself and others along the way. Let's get to it. This next episode is the last one for the season, and it's quite a unique and special one because actually I'm kind of introducing myself. My podcast producer, editor, architect, and magician, Matthew Bliss, said to me a little while ago, you know, we should do an interview at the end of the season where I interview you and we talk about, this and this and introduce the theme for next year. And he always has good ideas, and I said, great. So, dear listener, this is an interview with myself and Matt Bliss, and it's a beautiful conversation. He has a very creative, introspective, philosophical mind and likes asking questions that take you into new realms of thinking, shall I say. And he always stretches me and creates a great space for contemplation, thought, and also peace. There's a groundedness and a peace in the conversation. Anyway, without further ado, this is the last episode of the year. I hope you enjoy it. It's with me.
Welcome back to Mission Activated with my special guest, Aveline Clarke. How unusual does that sound?
And how unusual is it to have you here and me here as well? So what a
Hopefully a delight for the listener to realize that perhaps this episode is going to be a bit different than the episodes they've listened to this year. Perhaps for a bit of context, just very quickly, me being your current podcast editor and producer working furiously in the background to prepare your episodes for this year, I thought that to finish off this year, give it a nice tale and perhaps as a bit of a end-of-year treat for your listeners to expose a bit more of you to them. Because usually they only hear or see you asking the brilliant questions that you do. So I thought I'd ask you a couple. We'll explore a little bit of you and share a bit of you with the world. How does that sound?
a bit daunting, but I'm up for it. Let's do it. And thank you, Matthew. I love your questioning and I love your thought processes and the way your brain works, and of course all the amazing magic you do on the podcast. But yeah, I'm ready. Let's do this.
Let's get into it. Well, I know how you like to start, and geographically, I think we're pretty familiar with where you are. For context, I'm in Ireland, even though I sound Australian. What I'd like to know is where you are, not geographically, but just generally in the space of the podcast and how things have progressed this year. What's your current state of being for where you're at now and reflecting on Mission Activated from 2025?
That's a really deep and interesting question. Where am I now? I'm in a space of gratitude, and I have to say that having worked the podcast for a few years now, obviously doing the rebrand at the start of this year into mission activated, I feel completely comfortable within myself about what I'm creating with the podcast and it as a communication channel for people to learn more about themselves through other people's stories. And the rebrand was the right way to go. I did get a couple of people kind of question it, as you always get.
Mm.
Yet never once through the year did I stop and go, oh, I wish I hadn't done this. And having been running the podcast for a few years, and for the listeners who don't know how podcasts work, when you finish a podcast, you can switch it off and start another one. And what I did was I added to the existing podcast. So all the episodes that went back 3 years are still there, still listed under Mission Activated, not under 6-Star Leaders. So what that means is, from a longevity perspective, the platforms see me as a solid existing platform that's got some longevity. And there's a whole industry of, PR people, podcasting agents, and that go out and they try and find podcasts that have got some, legs, basically some longevity, some numbers behind it. And I constantly have been receiving emails and LinkedIn messages for the last couple of years about guests. Oh, I've got this amazing guest and da-da-da. And I still get them, but not as much as I used to, because I changed on all of the platforms, obviously, the description of what the podcast was about and the purpose of the podcast. So those that actually read that would have realized, oh, it's not just a business podcast anymore.
Mm.
The great thing is when I do get people contacting me saying, oh, I've got this amazing guest that can tell you how they went from this business and grew it, 10 times, and they made this many millions, and they did this and created this. They're amazing guests, and they can teach your listeners in, 60 minutes all about this process. I'm like, I yawn and I say, have you actually listened or read the purpose of the podcast? So it feels to me like gratifying when I'm able to politely thank them for the offer and say no, or at least go back and say, the podcast is about this. It's about people who are living on purpose, on mission. They're on their mission in this world, and here's how they're doing it. And that feels great. So within me, I'm on path. The podcast is on path, and I'm really grateful for the place that I'm in now.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And for a more behind the scenes, like, because I'm a podcast producer, I see a lot of this stuff for my other clients as well. Sometimes because of the way I set them up, the people who you're talking about that try to push guests on you get access to my email instead. So I don't think anyone listening who hasn't had a podcast before should underestimate how many emails fly out and how many podcasters get accosted by very low effort research that goes into that stuff. And it must feel great to have a good reason to turn people away because you've found what the podcast is now. And that's a really interesting part of making that decision too, that you don't just start fresh with a brand new feed. You rebranded and changed what already existed. And to me, that signals growth. Growth in the sense that you're happy to keep the past where it is and maybe even as a comparison or example for what it was, and then growth into what it is. So in terms of that growth for you, finding out missions that have been activated and if people are on the right path, do you feel like you're on the right path in terms of the mission that the podcast has and how it's met with the missions of the various guests you've had this year?
I would say yes, definitely. All the guests I had were right at the time. They came along at the right time. And when I explained to them what the podcast was about, there was an instant alignment with all of them. And like, I think it's been a while since I recorded the last one because I just had so many appropriate people around me in the first part of the year to actually record a lot of these episodes. And it was a joy. And it was also a journey to see how the conversations evolve. As you know, for some reason, when you're podcasting, when you're having these conversations, it's the energy of talking about different things, I believe, it's kind of like the mycelial network, or it's like a spider web energetically. And you kind of like attract and catch other ideas or things that are going on outside of you. And it comes into the flow of this conversation, and these new themes and topics come up. And it's like, wow, this person's talking about something that I was thinking about, or I'd heard about, or that's sort of been, inside of me bubbling away. And it's through the conversation that it becomes expressed into the world, and then it becomes real. It's like the evolution of consciousness, of topics, of people's awareness happens through this dialogue. And it's a really beautiful thing. I hope I've explained it in a way that people can understand. It's it's different from reading a book. You could sit alone and read a book and you learn something, but through dialogue, you don't know what's going to come. It's like this magic. It's like a spider web, and what floats in and catches in that spider web, you don't know. And through that, you then take it on, and then it's yours. It's been expressed, and it's in the energy of the guest, myself, and consciousness, life, being, and it then becomes an ingredient for the next conversation. It's like it's all stored into the mission activated podcast.
It's an interesting reflection, really interesting, because I think that's the grand mystery of life. It's how we discover new information. And in our digital age, it's very easy to relax into a very, I guess, a solo version of that. We have our Alex Hormozis floating around, writing these awesome books that tell us a lot about sales and how to connect with people to get something from it economically. But using a podcast in that way for yourself as growth to find out more about the world and what you should be looking to discover potentially from more guests, and also expanding your network and society generally, just making those connections is super. So a reflection from me would be that this podcast is excellent as a way to create space, not only to meet people where they are, but also to create that lasting connection. That hour that you spend with them, it creates a friend for life sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And the growth that you feel as a result of that is one of the spectacular things about podcasting.
Mm.
Are there any particular conversations you've had this year that you might pull on as one of the ones that pushed you in a particular direction that expanded that spider web just a little bit further than someone else might have?
That's really a hard question to answer, because there are so many brilliant conversations.
Well, just as a bit of a prompt, I know that the
Okay.
last episode in the feed, listener, if you haven't listened to that one, jump back, with Tomas Konya, he led you in it was like a meditation session or something just before the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a little bit different. I don't think that happens a lot on other podcasts. So, and his vibe generally was, it felt like he was looking at the entire world through a glass window and had a way to look at it that was very interesting. So in particular from him, I think he might have been quite impactful. Was there anything that he said that was enchanting?
Oh, he said many things that were enchanting. And you're right. He had a way of looking at the world, like he had the world in a glass bubble, and he was looking at the whole thing. Extremely wise man. For him, the takeaway was, you have a choice to react to circumstances in a negative way, even when those circumstances are really crappy and shitty. But we're human beings and we have a choice. And in fact, those situations are there to empower us if we want them to. And he really demonstrated that through the story of his journey. It really touched me in a big way. Mm.
Another one that I might, not to name drop or anything, but I remember you mentioned to us together that Jazz Rawlinson also reflected on the conversation she had with you, mentioning that it was one of the best podcast conversations she'd had. Not to put words in her mouth if that's not a direct quote, but what would you say about your chat with her? Because she's an extremely powerful force for good, I think, in the world.
Yeah, she is. And she is very deliberate about who she speaks to and where she shares her story. And in fact, I'd met her, just for some background, I'd met her back when the podcast was 6-Star Leaders. And she wasn't keen to be a guest at that point. And I didn't push it because a business podcast for her was not the right place, even though it was a business podcast based on purpose. And after I'd rebranded, I reached out to her and just let her know that I'd rebranded and showed her, this is the new podcast. And immediately she came back and she said, "Oh, that's perfect. That's exactly where I want to be." So again, it was one of those moments of validation about the podcast rebrand. And talking with her, I was nervous. I was nervous at the beginning of the conversation. Sometimes there are people that I meet and in the green room, like we do our little pre-chat, and I was nervous. And I don't know if you picked that up at the beginning of that conversation, if it was a memory that you have, but I think I was nervous because of her presence, but also her guardedness. And because she had so much behind these walls, so much that you could see that she's kind of like sitting there going, well, I've got a city behind these walls of experience and trauma and all this stuff. I don't know how much I'm going to give you. And I'm going to decide when I open the door and open the gate. And I think that was the energy I got. And for whatever reason, it worked. And she lifted the gate and out it came. And there was one moment in that conversation where I knew I'd reached an edge. Often with guests, when you've reached an edge of their personal journey where you potentially can't go any further because it's too raw. They're not ready to expose that. And just knowing how to just move around the edge without pushing. I had that with her as well. And as it turned out, she opened up even more and then, came back with that beautiful testimony that was unsolicited, and it was, talking with her felt like a gift. Yeah. A gift to the world.
It is interesting. Some of the, I guess, for the common parlance, highest achieving people that find themselves on mission do often have a degree of trauma or vulnerability that's difficult to explore. But I think that's a thing that you do incredibly well. To say you're well practiced would imply that there's, a level of ability that you get with dealing with someone's trauma during a conversation like that. But I don't think you do. I think it's the ability to adapt and treat the person that you're talking to with the respect they need, but also the space to share if they get it. And that's something that you do incredibly well. It's one of the reasons I admire you as a podcast host. And the reason that this podcast rebrand absolutely made sense. And to hear it validated from Jazz, that was a good moment.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. 100%.
There's been a lot of chat over this year with guests about education as well. You had Scott Coe, and I think we can put Monica Pemberton in that camp as well. Would you say that there's been a thread of educational reform coming through your conversations? And have you got any reflections on those?
Yeah, how interesting. Education, yes. What I heard, so I guess the threads around that from the guests was more around people educating themselves, as in whether they worked in education or were constantly educating themselves to then educate others. And I feel like we've been in a phase of learning, and I do believe it's part of the the ripple effect of the COVID era. People have had to reevaluate themselves, look at all parts of their lives, and as a result of that, people then go into periods of learning, however they do that. And I have seen a number of people, go through this space. Some have come out, some are teaching others already, others are just continuing the evolution or the learning. And I think for those that don't know what I'm talking about or what this topic is, maybe just sit back and ask yourself, where have you felt within you that there's this little pulse of, I need to examine that part of me, or go down this rabbit hole, or expand this part of my knowing, my skills, my understanding. What are you resisting? What are you holding back? I think all of us have been shown ways to actually expand our knowledge, and it's all about expanding ourselves. I believe that at the foundation of all of that, it's kind of like it's the calling to come home to ourselves. You can't figure out who you are without the education and that knowing, and whilst you're learning about something else, you're learning about it in relationship to you. And that's what I heard and felt with all those guests.
It's also maybe a misnomer with the podcast name that we can debunk with that in mind. When someone has their mission activated, that's not the end. That's not the journey finished. Like, you found the mission. Okay, good job. That's it. Tick. Graduated. When you find your mission, that's finding your path. And then, and if you're on mission and you're in touch with yourself and reflecting on yourself, you know what learning you need to seek, the change that you need to make in the world to realize that mission. And it's the combination of those things together that allows you to adapt in what is a rapidly changing environment in all aspects after the pandemic had its impact. It's interesting. I never thought of that before. Well, look, we can't skate around it too much. You laid out some really great pillars for us to talk about something that might be high mind for you at the moment. And I think it was a few questions that emerged throughout the conversations you had during the year as well. The subject of AI. I think that is a landscape that is shifting so quickly at the moment. Not only is it being revealed that the technological advancement is important for us to keep track of, or company incentives to where ad dollars are starting to get talked about within the LLMs themselves, but the moral, the societal, the ethical impact, instead of asking what can we do, what should we do, seems to be very high mind at the moment. What's your position currently with AI, and how is that informing your mission?
How long have you got, Matt?
I'll set a timer.
Boy, what a question. I ran an marketing automation business for 10, 12 years. Technology has always been one of my skills, natural abilities, worked with that and people in the corporate space and brought that out into small business. So in other words, I naturally adopt new technology. I find it easy. I can translate it to people and situations and help them use it for a good reason, for a good outcome. So with the explosion of AI, I'm not going to talk about, I guess, too much of the last few years, but I'm going to talk about, I think, where I'm at now. So being someone who's really comfortable with new technology and excited by it, not from a shiny object perspective, like, oh, I'm going to go and get every tool that's out there. I'm pretty measured, right? With marketing automation, I saw the explosion of everything from 2004 when we had the onset explosion or the launch of social media with Facebook and Twitter, and then marketing automation systems that came online. And I got involved with one of the early ones. And so what I learned was understand the technology, how it works, and then and then I watched sort of other players come on board. AI is a bit different. It's got the buzz of social media, but it's got this exponential impact that we haven't seen before. And one of the things being in the marketing space, and I don't love calling myself a marketer, but I do work that's around that for companies. I've watched the use of AI and I use it myself. Okay. Full disclosure. Love it for basic research. Got a Perplexity app on my phone. If I want to know something, I go in and I ask. My kids, I've got 14-year-old boys, have not wanted to use it. And I've said, when they've got to do something, I've suggested once or twice to use it. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to figure it out on our own. Okay. And I guess I've just watched the way that the community, other people have responded to it. So I'm always looking at how we're using it, how we're responding to it. And then if you step back, when I stepped back and looked at this and then listened to some of the thought leaders around this, I thought, well, I could get swept up in the hype and become an early adopter of it, like I have other technologies, other systems, tools, and be an expert in it. Or I could not. And for the reason of I can see where it's going without the guardrails on, without having, I don't know what you call it, a global mechanism to actually safeguard how it's used in different countries, industries, societies. It's pretty scary what can happen. And there are some smart people that have been talking about this over the last 6-12 months, more so in the last 6 months. It's becoming clear where this is going. And if you look at the purpose statement of OpenAI, go onto their website, it's basically to replace a human. It's overt. And I actually had a dialogue with ChatGPT about this. And I was arguing with ChatGPT. And in the end, it agreed with me that they should update their purpose statement. But I guess the point of everything I'm saying is we're in a place where we have a choice about how we use it. How every business that looks at it, they have a choice of how they adopt it. And if we're not careful, we're going to impact humanity in a really, really negative, scary, horrible way. That's the truth. That's my truth. That's what I believe. So how do we as lowly, business owners, whether we're solopreneurs and small businesses, wherever we are, how do we engage with AI without letting it overtake our lives? And what is the danger of using AI at this point? So these are the questions that I've asked myself. And what where I stand, and hopefully you don't see me as hypocritical in saying all these things and still using it. I think it's important to understand how things work and use it for simple things, use it for things that actually are going to help in a efficiency manner, or in a way that's not actually damaging or taking away from the lifeblood and the purpose of humanity. That's my where I stand on it. I've seen people and clients of mine just divert everything to AI when it comes to writing, doing their marketing. Oh, there's a tool that can basically do everything for you. It can write your webinar script, it can then do your blogs, and then we can connect it through to all your social medias. It can create all of your posts, create the images, the banners, the whole lot, schedule it all. You don't have to do anything. It's amazing. I'm like, there is nothing amazing about a bunch of AI created content that people can smell a mile away. That leads me to me, the killer in the negative thing that's really the the elephant in the
Scratching
room.
at the insides of that
Yeah,
dark room that you can't quite
yeah,
get to yet.
that's
Mhm.
it. So what is it? It's a killer of creativity. And if people outsource their thought processes and their critical thinking ability to a bot, how are they going to be activated on their mission? How are they going to be serving the world in a way that life intended for them? So these are the questions that I've been asking myself. And yeah. So
It's
like
huge.
you asked, you opened a can of worms, and I did say how long you got. So hopefully I've answered your question without
Yeah.
raising 2,000 other ones.
Oh no, you absolutely have raised all those questions. It's just about us respecting the listeners' time for what they came here for, I think, because I'm on track with you on everything you said there.
If you're loving this conversation and want to dive deeper into purposeful work, then it's time to thank the 6-Star Leaders community for making this episode possible. The 6-Star Leaders are a group of purpose-driven business owners committed to doing business differently by embracing their unique genius and skills to make a real impact. It's a space for learning, growth, and truly becoming empowered in everything that you do. If you're ready to discover your own 6th star, go to bit.ly/6-star community-intro and book a chat to learn more. We look forward to seeing you.
You mentioned social media before. It's definitely going to be similar. The interesting thing about AI is that it's an answer in search of a question for the most part. I think a lot of people, when they think about it, we're beyond the stage where people are thinking, but what is this for? Because it's started to already kind of fill the cracks of where the value comes from. Value in inverted commas, just in case. Or sneer quotes. Sneer quotes. That's probably nicer for the tenor of the conversation at the moment. But the super interesting part is two things you've mentioned already. First is that your kids are against using it. I think that's very interesting. And I think that's a social impact that we underestimate quite a lot with regards to AI, is that, I guess in the old parlance, nature finds a way, right? I think the future generations are going to grow up with the technology and potentially with our moral objections against the technological advancement. So in 10 to 20 years, wherever AI gets to by that point, we could have an interesting, very cognizant generation that's trying to cope with whatever that world looks like. But on the other side of that, with this podcast, you may have invariably also had an answer in search of a question that you've now answered as well. That it creates space for people to share their own thinking, their own internal reflections. This liminal space of a podcast conversation that you're sharing with the dutiful listener. It is that direct answer to what AI is currently looking to creep into and automate. That finding that mission, it's not found in a sycophantic text-based conversation with an LLM based across several corners of the planet from server farms, and that is incentivized to tell you what you need to hear in order to be happy and not tell you anything that it's not allowed to, whatever those guardrails might be. It can be a tool for reflection, but there's reflective practice in solitude and there's reflective practice in community. Reflecting on the community you created this year with Mission Activated. You've talked about education, you've talked about trauma, you've talked about alternative ways for how people uplift others. It's a very conscientious approach to business and to people finding their path. And perhaps the intermediary salve for anyone who's feeling what you've described there with AI would be to listen to the episodes of the podcasts for this year and kind of get an insight into how they can conduct that reflection for themselves and seek their path with other people's paths kind of intersecting. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's beautiful, because I just had this image there of someone with a choice. Should I go and listen to these podcast episodes, or should I just go to the AI bot and ask it the question? So this one's faster, but it's never, ever, ever going to give you what you really need. You've got to take the human path. We cannot lose touch with who we are as humans and how we learn, how we grow, and connection with other people is part of that. It's a deep part of that. And that's one of the beautiful things about podcasting. So we can't speed up our learning by using AI. I know there might be someone out there who disagrees with me. I don't care. We can't fast forward the journey. There's no value in that. There's no value in fast forwarding the journey by going to ChatGPT and asking it for the answers, because we're not going to grow. We have to go through the experience to actually evolve, to grow, to learn, to become who we really are. So there's a bit of a warning there. If someone listening to this thinks, well, I use ChatGPT all the time and I ask it to do so many different things and I can't live without it, I hope that you're clear on what you're using it for and you're not letting it direct and take away some thought processes, activities, and necessary connections and things that you need to do as a human being to figure out who you are, why you're here, and how to go about that. Because when we outsource that to the AI, that's when we've lost. Humanity loses.
Funny, someone who we're both a big fan of, Simon Sinek, something that he talks about with self-improvement more recently came to mind there. He uses the analogy of getting fit, getting healthy and going to the gym and stuff. There is a guaranteed path for you to be healthier, fitter, stronger, more slim, if that's part of your goals. And it's go to the gym. And then someone asks, well, how long do I have to go? And the answer invariably is as long as you need to go to get to where you need to go. Because it's 100% guarantee that you will get fit. It is the tried and tested method. You are guaranteed to get fit 100%. But the thing is that path isn't clear. You need to walk it. You need to go to the gym every day, set that habit, eat healthily for as long as you need to in order to get there. But it's a guarantee at the same time. And the same guarantee can't be said for perhaps someone who's thought about gastric band or Ozempic. It's a shortcut and it's a great tool that we have in our back pocket now. But someone who doesn't like that answer might grab an Ozempic. Or someone who is looking to create the best beef Wellington that they possibly could, realize it takes several hours, plenty of ingredients, lots of skill, and instead just grabs the microwavable one off the aisle. There's trade-offs when we take those shortcuts. And what you're talking about there is not trading off the shortcut of being told what you need to do when the most important part is going through the journey, going through the reflection. You can't necessarily get through what you need to find your mission at 2 times speed. People can help you get there, but that's why people like yourself and this podcast exist, as a way to immerse yourself in the modeling of those reflective practices to help you get there.
Exactly. You've said it so brilliantly. And as human beings, we're energetic beings. You're not going to have an energy exchange with an AI bot. Sorry, it's just not going to happen.
Well, I'll have you know that Google's tracked the energy exchange of LLMs, but it's a different kind of energy, I think. But yeah, that connection, you can't have that connection with something that's essentially Schrodinger's cat, encapsulated in a box that's telling you things that you want to hear. But I think the problem is in where we are now, with the attention economy and the position it's in. Anything that is happy to have our attention and gives back to us in a way that satisfies that attention giving, that's probably endemic of the purposelessness we find with people injecting themselves into ChatGPT for those unfortunate conversations we hear about where people use it to therapize themselves.
Yes.
Are there any other massive threads that you would like to pull on as reflections of your conversations from this year before we dive into what you're thinking about for next year?
The other key thread that came through most of the guests was about owning who you are. It's funny. It's just another angle of the topic we're just talking about, really. The guests in each of their own individual stories was able to sort of demonstrate through their own journey and what they were saying about the importance of just being you, not being afraid of being you, and showing up in your authenticity, who you really are, in your natural state, and having the courage to be yourself. That was the big theme that came through.
Identity is huge. And it's funny, you think about this stuff and like even in conversation, reflecting on it, you kind of think about it a bit more. So, listener, if you hear silence, we haven't gone away. It's just us thinking about stuff.
Yeah. Take the opportunity for you to think about it as well.
Yeah. Identity is huge. Yeah, it's a big one. And sometimes, we've said that a lot. We've said that being here in this space, listening to someone else's story helps you get there. But at the same time, it can't be 100% of your time spent listening to everyone else's stories. You need to create space for yourself as well. Not with an LLM necessarily, but, going for a walk and just musing about life, or taking an analog approach to making that space for yourself. We won't call it a personal podcast. We don't want any competition for Mission Activated. So 2026, what do you, I think the phrase that you use quite a lot is what seeds have you planted in 2025 that we're going to see the fruits of next year?
Great question, one that I love. And we're kind of leading up to it, right? Given how this conversation has unfolded and what we've talked about already. The seeds for me that have been planted are doing a series next year under, Mission Activated is the same, but I want to focus more specifically on stories from people who are creative in whatever creative space they are, to draw out from them how they have used their creativity to be on mission and to be sharing their gifts with the world. There are so many creative people around me. I grew up as an artist, I remember when my friends would say, what do you want to do when you're older? You'd be hanging out with your friends when you're teenagers, and I'd be, I want to be an artist. And my parents would shudder, no, you're not being an artist. And
you have to be an architect or a doctor, something, that contributes to this industrial society we've created.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You understand, you read the same books as them. And anyway, so I've always had artistic people around me. So it's not just people that are good at, art. It's like art in so many different forms. It's creative, whether you're writing, whether you're producing, whether you're whatever it is. Because it's my belief that the people who are creative are the ones who are actually creating spaces, energy, and outcomes, answers, new ideas, inventions. These are the people that are actually moving things forward. And I'd like to showcase them to inspire everyone else to figure out how to use, not figure out, but just not forget how to be who they really are, where your creativity comes from. No, I'm not talking about everyone needing to start drawing or painting or singing or cooking or whatever it is. We're all creative. The creativity comes from the part of us that's uniquely us. What we create, what we bring into the world is a creation, whether it's a business around finance or it's a painting, okay? Still creating. The point, though, is that people in creative businesses and creative pursuits are following this internal hunger, passion, drive, desire. They're being pulled. They're more, I'd say, this generalization, they're more in tune with who they really are and what they're here to bring into the world. So I'm excited about interviewing people who are doing that and uncovering themes, threads, finding out how they do it, how they get through their days, their weeks, where their inspiration comes from, and what drives them to do it each and every day. Yeah.
That's really cool. It feels almost like a part 2.
Yeah.
Because the way I think about creativity is kind of like what someone mentioned on a podcast I listened to recently. Joe Foley of Unsolicited Advice on YouTube. He's a philosophical bloke, literally a philosophical academic.
Yeah.
And he said that philosophy as a discipline is often responsible for creating jobs for academics. Like where mathematics was previously in the philosophical realm, but now it's its own discipline, and areas of science in that sense as well. Creativity is kind of the same, where it's a space to make new connections, explore where the world could go or could be and the potential. And in the way that the person is creative, exploring that a little bit more and sometimes pushing society forward in that sense too. So the reflections on people's journey to get to their mission in 2025, it seems like an adequate mirror to make 2026, exploring the potential of the world through creativity and how people can further extend their mission beyond that. I really like that.
Thank you. And that means where's my phone? Leaving this at the door, put it down, let go of the AI. It's the opposite. It's the antidote. It's the antidote to the drug of AI.
I think the devil's advocate in me wants to say that there is room for what you just mentioned as to leave at the door. But I think neurologically, it cannot be denied that having that technology available to us is a crutch. Yeah. It's the extra joint on the arm that evolution, Darwined out of our out of our existence, because we didn't need it. We didn't need that extra joint. And technically, in terms of how we develop, we don't need that stuff either. It helps to inform. It's a tool. It doesn't facilitate the growth that we want to be able to find our mission.
That's exactly right. It can facilitate the growth of your business, for sure. through like the medium that we're using right now, technology. We could be using our phone for this, but it's technology. Yes, that facilitates the growth of the podcast listeners and being able to touch more people. But it doesn't facilitate your personal growth, and that's the key.
So do you have anyone in mind, or are we leaving the guest list a secret?
I've got a bunch of people around me, and I'll rattle off a couple of disciplines. So I've got photographers, videographer, I've got a landscape designer, I've got a ceramic artist, I've got a chef, I've got a lady who's she's an artist and an energy worker. I've got probably about 12 so far just on my list, and I haven't reached out to them. I've just gone, these are the people I want so far.
Okay. Well, this is your calling card, this episode.
So if you're listening to this, guess what? if you recognize, yourself in what I've just described, yeah, you'll be hearing from me.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And the reflection that takes place afterwards at the end of 2026 will be interesting too. Because of course the world will be growing and shifting and changing around you while you create these episodes. So where the conversation ends up in that instance will be very interesting.
Yes, it really will be.
That's the most speculative and diplomatic way I can put it. So with that new direction of Mission Activated, is it going to have an ongoing effect with your other subsidiary talents and investments in your business activities and other things?
For the community, I've got some things in the pipeline around creating some in-person events. So next year is going to be more about those and holding them also in 2 different locations. Connection and community is so important, right? So it's going to be coming back to more grassroots for that. And
Great.
My other business is, I guess, the marketing one that I mentioned earlier. And that's going to be impacted as well. I think it all is, because everything, when I evolve like this, everything gets impacted. Journey Point will continue, and I'm looking forward to seeing how I can bring about more of this into the work I do with clients. Yeah, I'm always evolving the work I do, and I know that the moment I start talking to creatives, I'm just going to get so much inspiration and knowledge, and it's like this wisdom that gets downloaded through, like I was explaining before, it's the web, right? This magical web, and knowledge gets downloaded and infused in and around us, the listeners, myself, and then I go and take all that and I go, oh, that's what I need to shift and evolve. Okay, wow, there might be a new program or a new something, but there's going to be more. And I think for me as well, I've got a bit of a calling to spend more time doing art, which I've put aside for a long time.
You preempted my next question, which was going to be, are you going to be revisiting the art again? And could I ask, what was it you enjoyed most with the art? Was it painting, drawing? I don't suppose growing up that there was much digital design at that stage, or perhaps you were up for murals or graffiti.
I was friends with a graffiti artist for a while, and he did lots of tags with my name in it. So I've got a couple of those that are really cool from my teenage years. But my art was more drawing, charcoals, doing still lifes. I'd go to art school, and as an adult, so I've worked during the day, then I'd go to art school at night, and I loved it. Still a lot of I did a series in Sydney when I lived there many moons ago, doing like that. There were mainly nudes. I'm just trying to think. I don't think there was ever. Yeah, there was a series of, like, I think it was a 6-month course and there were nudes every week, and they were all different people. And from the 75-year-old man with a pacemaker in his chest to, young people. And it was quite interesting. So I learned all about how to draw form and humans, and that always interested me much more than doing just a still life. But I still had to do still lifes, and some of my art is on the wall in the house. So pastels, crayons, pencil, charcoal, that kind of thing.
You may
Thanks.
have to shuffle around some of those pictures and place them in your background. Listener, if you're not aware, she is on YouTube if you'd like to interrogate her space behind her next year, making sure that we could see some of that artwork up there.
It might happen. We'll see.
I'd say it will. I mean, awaking old passions is sometimes easier or harder, depending on how you reflect on them. But more importantly, it's about creating the space. And I think you're in a good position to do that with where you're at. What would you say, just as we round out the conversation, is the thing that you're looking forward to most generally in 2026?
I feel like next year is going to bring out a lot of situations. I feel like next year is going to force people to really dig deep, figure out who they are. I feel like we're in a bit of a calm before the storm, so to speak, and I don't know why that is. It's just a feeling I have, and I feel like there's a ramp up. I believe a lot of people are going to need something new, figure out how to survive, get back to basics, how they're going to figure out how to traverse what's going on in the world. And I'm looking forward to really being able to create more space for people to come back to home, to come back to center, to feel at peace, to know themselves again. I feel like from now on, when I say from now on, from today, I feel like with the onset of what AI has done to us already and how it will continue, and all the other factors of social media, the world, the pace at which we're evolving, it will become even more and more necessary for people to touch and to connect to each other and to nature. And I'm looking forward to creating that space in whatever form that is.
The image that conjured for me was a wave pulling into the shore. The ocean, waves can be small, sometimes they can be large. I'd say we're in the middle of a large wave at the moment. And that wave has crashed on the shore and it's pushing onto the beach, but eventually it has to pull back. And that's probably what you're feeling. There's that stage of pullback when the wave disappears and we're left with a different beach than after the wave hit it, and how we come to terms with what that beach is like and what it means for us. I think, that's what I heard from what you said. Hopefully I'm on point.
You're on point. I love your visual descriptions, metaphors, examples.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. Yeah, you're on it.
For the listener that made it this far, I have a 50% hit rate with my analogies and metaphors, so I feel like I'm doing pretty good in this conversation. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what you get up to next year and hearing through the conversations where our creativity and that reflective space can take us. I won't say beyond AI, but let's say beyond the rivers and the throes of social and societal change to further find ourselves again. It's going to be great.
It is. And before we go, Matt, I'd like to ask you what you are most excited about for next year.
The thing that I'm most excited about is having what I think I've found is kind of the mission for me, being able to realize that change in myself and in the communities that I want to give back to. For context, podcast production isn't the only thing that I want to do. I'm currently exploring in a podcast that you featured on for one of the first episodes, Rethinking Podcasting, where I take a bit of a philosophical angle on some podcasting topics. So for those who aren't familiar with the craft of podcasting or the industry itself, it may be a bit highfalutin or just sleeping material to listen to while you go to sleep. But it's exploring a new space for me. And without changing world, what I really want to do is model the change that I want to see. And it's the deeper thinking, it's the reflective space, it's the systems that create shortcuts and save time. It's not the tools and the money and the AI of things that makes things quicker for us. And just that deeper understanding of ourselves, specifically in the podcasting space for me, but critical thought and reflection, I think, are the biggest parts that I want to see from the world and that I'll be trying to bring out in the world next year. So that's what I'm looking forward to most.
Thank you. I know that was a bit of a curveball question, but I asked it because you are such a reflective thinker, deep thinker. You work on a number of different podcasts. You get so much intel from the work that you do, and you have a really good sense and pulse of the world in general. And not just because of the people that you're connected to as you're editing and listening and all of that, but also the other communities you're in and what you do. And I really value your pulse, the pulse check of Matt Bliss. It's a really valid one, and I've always respected and valued your input. And I will say a big shout out to you, because you've asked me questions this year about this podcast that have forced me to stop and think and be more conscious about what I'm doing. And I think it was your questioning last year that actually got me to do the rebrand. And,
Okay.
From the conversation we had last year around the break, because I took a break from the podcast, and it was your counsel that gave me permission to have the space to then figure out what that new podcast was going to be. So you helped create the space for me to create Mission Activated.
And if that doesn't extol the benefits of having a podcast and creating those kinds of connections and networking, I don't know what does. Because we met through podcasting.
Yeah.
It's a great way to create community. And I really appreciate that. That's one thing I will be changing in 2026 as well. Not like swatting off the compliments I get. That's something I'm very bad at. Thank you. I appreciate it. And, it's a team effort.
Yeah, it is.
And being connected with the right kind of people yields amazing results. People love seeing 10x anything in what they do. It doesn't have to just be financials. It can be the realized gains that you see as a result of an awesome friendship or networked connection. And I see that in you as well. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So no nuggets this time. I think if you've listened so far, there's been plenty there scattered around for you to pick up. And I guess with no further ado, we'll see you, the listener or watcher, next year.
Stay tuned for the exciting new series on the creative people.
Look forward to it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Mission Activated. If today's conversation resonated with you, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Remember, your mission matters. When you live on purpose, not only do you transform your own life, but you inspire others to do the same. Until next time, stay aligned, keep activated. I'll see you then.